There's an important discovery that helps us understand the link between genetics and disease. Researchers have discovered that parts of our DNA, once dismissed as simply junk, is in fact critical for regulating the behavior of our cells, organs, and other tissue. The breakthrough is being hailed as the biggest leap in genetics since the mapping of the human genome. The findings are the outcome of the ENCODE project launched by the National Institutes of Health in 2003. The comprehensive international effort involved over 400 scientists who sought to resolve questions left unanswered by the Human Genome Project. Joining me now for a closer look at the discovery is Gina Kolata. She is a medical reporter for the New York Times. Welcome.
Thank you, Charlie.
So let's talk about the study first. 10-year study.
Right.
Lots of money, lots of people involved.
That's right.
Yeah. They were in search of what?
They wanted to understand what is actually controlling the genes. So what they realized is that genes are only like 1% of your DNA, the actual genes. One guy likes talking about it as the 99% that's been ignored and the 1% that gets all the attention. The reason was no one really knew what to make of that 99%. They thought that a portion of it might be important.
They called it junk?
They started calling it dark matter. Like in the universe, you know, when they say there's this dark matter, we don't know what it is, but it's really important. They said, we think this stuff might be important. The junk started getting, that idea started getting discarded. They said, it's got to mean something.
Yeah.
But they said, you know, what is it and what does it do? And so they decided they would have a gigantic project, and it was just coordinating all the people was huge. The data analysis was unbelievable. A lot of these people were computer scientists. And they said, we have to look at this stuff not just as a string of DNA, but as a three-dimensional thing, which is what DNA is, and try to say, what's going on here, and how is it affecting genes? I mean, for example, they said they knew that there's something must be controlling genes in a very specific way, because otherwise every cell in your body has the same DNA, but you have a liver cell, a heart cell, a blood cell, a lung cell. How are they controlled?
More than that, they found out that they now have some understanding of how identical twins, one will get a disease and the other will not.
Right, and they said that that's because their genes are usually pretty much identical. Genes don't change as much as this other stuff does. And the other things can be affected very easily by environment, by something you were exposed to, or by something maybe that you did that could change some of the chemicals that are attached to these other parts of the DNA. So they said this can start explaining a lot of the things that they didn't understand before, like why is it even that traits like height, it seems to be so strongly inherited, why can't they find a height gene? Well, it's because it's not the gene, it's the thing that controls other genes, the dark matter.
A regulator or a kind of switch.
They called them switches. They said that there are millions of switches for only 20,000 genes. And not only that, the switches can be on, off, higher, lower, in all different combinations in different cells. So you have just like an incredible array of ways of very subtly controlling what genes are active and how and what's going on.
Somebody described this as like a Google map in which you see from a far distance Earth, and that's what we knew. And now we're able to look at highways and stops and all kinds of things that have become visible because of this discovery.
And they say it's going to be incredibly important now as they start to do what they call whole genome sequencing. They're doing that now in cancer in particular, where they're saying, well, let's not just look at the genes in a cancer cell, let's look at the entire stretch of DNA and say, what's making this cell grow? Well, often they'll see thousands of changes in this dark matter, and they say, which ones are important? And how do we know what they are? And what this ENCODE project is doing is it's starting to map things. It's starting to give you this roadmap. And they say, if you see a change here, these are the genes that it may be affecting, and this is how it may affect them.
And this was a combined, concerted effort by a whole number of countries and number of institutions around the world.
That's right. But it was funded by the National Institutes of Health. But they got all the best people in the world involved in it.
Yeah. This is a big deal.
It is a big deal, yeah.
Understanding disease. How is disease turned on in a human body?
That's right. It is. It's a huge deal because before this, if you only look at the genes, you get a very distorted picture of what's going on because you have to turn genes on and off and up and down. In fact, the last time I was here with you, there was a guy named Lucas Wortman, and he had this whole genome sequencing for his leukemia. And what they found was that one gene was kind of in overdrive. Well, why was that gene in overdrive? Probably because something in the dark matter matter was turning it on and making it make way too much. And when they tuned that, when they found that they had a drug that could turn that gene down, and then they could control his cancer. But it was not the gene was normal. It was perfectly fine, but something in the dark matter was a switch was on.
Right.
It was in the on position and wouldn't turn off.
And what caused that switch to do that?
A cancer mutation in the cancer itself, not in the gene, but you can mutate the dark matter too. He had a mutation in his dark matter.
So if you got a mutation in the dark matter, it'll affect what happens in the genes.
That's right.
And what happens in the genes will affect whether you get a disease or not, like leukemia.
Right. That was they call it the driver. They call that the driver for his leukemia.
So what we hope to come out of this, and this takes years, is some way to eliminate and minimize the effect that these regulators and switches have on the genes that will produce.
That's right, absolutely, and that gives you a lot of new drug targets. It tells you when you see something that's like in Lucas's case, where you see a gene that's in overdrive, if you find the switch, you can say, we don't have to go after the gene, we can go after the switch. We can affect that switch because it's not working right. So that gives you a whole different way of looking at diseases.
And how long will it take to be able to see the manifestation of this?
Well, it depends on what disease and what gene. I spoke to a guy that studies prostate cancer, and he says this immediately helps them when they start to look at people's prostate cancer DNA,
right,
to start asking themselves what parts of the dark matter that are already identified in this ENCODE project are important in making some of these cancers grow. So he feels that this will give them new targets within, very soon, within a few years. And actually start making some progress on some prostate cancers. But other things will take longer, I'm sure.
Eric Landa said, quote, Eric Landa is well known and been on this program many times and has made many public appearances. He said, this is a stunning resource. My head explodes at the amount of data. Someone else said that the human DNA is a lot more active than we expected, and there are a lot more things happening than we expected. That was from Ewan Burney of the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, European Bioinformatics Institute. So, I mean, it's a bit like this whole international collection of brain power has been put.
That's right.
On and it took them 10 years to come to this result.
Well, they really needed a lot of the technological advances that went on along the way, and even the data processing advances, because they had so much data. And what they discovered were not just switches, that they discovered that pieces of DNA that they thought were like fossils, dead genes that had sort of been carried along but they were dead, actually being reprocessed and used for other reasons. I mean, they were finding that that's what he meant by a lot more active. It wasn't just turning genes on and off. It was all sorts of little control things in there in areas where they said, there's nothing going on. This is a dead gene.
Yeah, to continue your article, the discoveries also can reveal which genetic changes are important in cancer and why. As they begin determining the DNA sequence of cancer cells, researchers realized that most of the thousands of DNA changes in cancer cells were not in genes,
right,
but are in dark matter.
That's right. It's kind of amazing, isn't it? I mean, it really sort of gives them a whole new vista and a whole new resource to try to understand things.
Here's what's stunning for me. It is how much we're learning that we didn't know about the way the human body goes about determining disease and determining who we are and how we are. I mean, we're just tapping into this extraordinary
I think this is an amazing time, and I think this is just the beginning of it. I mean, I just feel privileged to be able to report on this as it's happening. It's just a sea change, really, in what people can see and do and understand.
And like so many other things, once you make a discovery like this, you can pour more IQ and more money into it and produce results you never imagined.
Well, this project is continuing. There's
right,
more to learn about the dark matter. And there's more projects coming along. And they have other projects which are just also kind of awesome. They're doing, taking common cancers now, and they're going at them from every direction. They did colon cancer, they just did lung cancer, breast cancer is coming up. What they're doing is they're getting cancer cells from lots of patients. They're doing whole genome sequencing, all the DNA. They're looking at the genes. They're looking at everything, and they're saying, what are the most important changes, and how can we attack them, and how can we understand these diseases in a way we never did before? That to me is amazing too.
Let me know as soon as you hear something.
I will.
Gina Kolata from the New York Times. This is an important story, and we're so pleased to have you come here
Thank
and
you,
help us
Charlie.
understand it.
Thanks so much.
Back in a moment. Stay with us.